Perhaps if you look deep into my heart, I would love to speak about architecture even more, perhaps, than the lecture we are going to do. But why I'm doing a lecture on cities, on the relation between architecture and cities? Because I'm very discontent about the circumstances in which I'm often asked as an architect to intervene in sites. In Canberra, if you have to do an embassy in a city, yeah, perhaps full of space, but where is the city? Then we doubled the density of this plot, but it's of no use. And in order to get further, we should go on and think from global to local. And if architects just are happy to what I am, to do their play with bricks, or with wood, or with curtain facades, or with layering of space, and that's what I like the most, as I like art the most. But in terms of society and responsibility for society and the place architecture takes in, we're doing a lecture on cities and the relation between cities, density and architecture. And I did write this book, and can manage that there will be a PDF somewhere so you can read it. And what I'm doing is I go around, the book is a bit from 2006, 2007, and after, of course, the research went on. And if I'm an architect, and being an architect, a lecture is going from different corners, and you might get lost. Where is the line of what he is telling? So we do quickly the line. Sustainability is about energy, but materials, water and space. And of course, Al Gore put emphasis on energy, but in fact energy is not a problem at all. Each day there is enough produced by the sun. The only question is how to put it in our tank of the cars. And while we don't know how to do that, we use fossil energy, but in fact it's not necessary, it's a question of techniques and we'll solve that. Materials, and especially water, related to food, to life, is a much more important question, but hopefully if politicians are capable in solving the energy question, then that's lower school, primary school work, then they can do the real job on materials and water, and I think the real job is space. What we are doing up to now is spoiling space, and in terms of ecological responsibility, it's silly. But it's not a question of morality and that it should be more ecological only. Of course, if we will save life, we should do. But the reason to study density is because I like attractive cities. And with me, there are many people, many city lovers, and more, that for economical reasons, social reasons, and psychological reasons for their own development, love to be part of that attractive cities. And when I talk about density, cities full of space, we discussed if a city is full of space, it's full, so there's no space. But it's a play, a bit poetical with this, because what I mean is space, of course, is openness. So if it's filled with mass, it would be solid. If it was filled with people, it could be claustrophobic, it could be chaotic, stressful, but in fact it's not about density in that sense of the word, it's about proximity to other happenings. So amenities, activities, and more it's proximity to ideas, which brings us to the feeling that cities can offer us a lot. So you need a critical mass, but a critical mass combined with open, accessible networks. And diversity is the first thing that gives relief to density. If density is just understood as being packed together, it becomes solid, it becomes without space. But as soon as there's diversity, you're roaming from one to another experience, and it gets you thinking about, what do I think about this, what do I love, what do I fear, and how is it with you, and we can talk about it, and doing so we get an inner talk, cycling through the city, and the city becomes ours. If it's just like a military collection of same Mao Zedong jackets, and all the people look the same, then you feel claustrophobic. Diversity brings relief. We should have open, accessible networks in which the public and the private realms are very much interweaved. And we know that more and more we are in the transition to a knowledge-based economy. And it's while we are in that transition that ideas and getting close to other people and to ask, why do you love this? Why do you think this is important? And speak about it, that the city provides a lot. That's a strange thing. A lot of people think, but I can go to the internet and I can go everywhere. So what if I'm in Thailand? I can be connected with the whole world, so I can live there and work in the city. But the real thing, I think, is that the more we surf on the web, we want to surf in real life as well. And we want to be connected physically, easily, with other people, other happenings, other activities, other ideas. And it brings us to the decline of the myth of freedom brought by automobility. The feeling that driving in a car, Route 66, Easy Rider, is freedom. We went out of Sydney on Monday at 4 o'clock. Yeah. And there's a question that you get different living patterns in a city. And I think the mixture of living patterns, for instance, between men and women, getting rid of the fixed role patterns, in which you say, I'm doing this and you do that. No, half of the day you think, this is going crazy. We have to change it. Can you pick up the kids? Then I do it tomorrow and I'll cook you a good meal tomorrow. And that's only possible if you're not harnessed in a life pattern in which you come from Liverpool to the center of the city and you're working in Liverpool and you phones and you should be there in 20 minutes. No. So if you can cycle and combine your route, taking up food, taking the kids, go to the library, go to a cafe, combine all those things and you can surf in the city. And that's what new city lovers do. Because the idea of an American dream, this is much safer for our kids. This is how we want to live. We want to provide the best for our kids. so we should do this. Whereas the city is a slum, is deteriorating, there's crime over there, it's a healthy move out. But by moving out, we have to bring the kids up to school, and others do the same. Whereas when I was a young boy, I lived on the pedestrian way in front of the house, could make my cycle tours, could learn to cycle through the traffic. First in our street, just simple, the pedestrian way, then mid in the street, and then I was allowed to go around the corner. And this is very telling us a lot, in that sense that here you see of successive generations, the area they were allowed to roam when they were 8 years, as I remember, and they had an action radius of in 99, so that's the great-grandfather. Does it work? Okay, but you see. And he was allowed to walk over this area. And then his son, the grandfather, the area shrank up to there. Next generation, mother, was allowed to walk to the swimming pool only a half mile away. So it went back from 10,000 to 1,600 to 800 to 270 meters. So the possibilities for kids to grow into the world has shrank instead of being abroad. Move out, go out of the city, and you'll be happy. Roam into the world. And now, there's something that's not working. Oh. Yeah. And of course, living in the city, it's scary. And mother say, don't look! Look straight forward. The father thinks, hey, what's happening? And that evening they're talking about, what did we see? And mother say, yeah, you shouldn't look. And father say, yeah, but it's possible. It's part of real life. You can do it this way. And it's growing up, the kids. And this is the center of Holland in 1950, 1960, 70, 2000. And that's why the action radius is everywhere shrinking. So more and more there are economical, social and cultural changes that do result that the city as the motor of those developments offer a more attractive and sustainable alternative for the massive growth of the suburban landscape. I don't think you shouldn't understand me as I'm against urban sprawl. So no one should go into urban sprawl, because the quintessence of my lecture is diversity is the most important thing. So urban sprawl, okay, but not for everyone. It's a possibility. But in Holland, it became the only possibility. Our production machine of providing houses only produced urban sprawl. So there was no choice. And I believe diversity is the main thing. But I also think that, as I'm explaining, that the transition to a new economy, to a new age, to a sustainable decade, I hope, at the end of this decade, will make that, as in New York, they will start to have cycle lanes and get rid of the cars. And of course, this is happening everywhere. And from slums everywhere the gentrification is running in. And what happened is that from opportunity poor in the center of the city, the people went out to the opportunity rich area around the city. But more and more they come back and they occupy the center and move out the people who are less capable in providing for themselves the best conditions. And if you see in London, the creative class, and London is perhaps the best example, the most pregnant example for this, the creative class went to the center of London, occupied all the houses over there, made rentals which are crazy high. It's nearly impossible to pay unless you work in the city, unless you work in the new academy, and even then there's such a huge demand on living in the center that it's coloring more and more purple one. Whereas the labor people, or in fact the service class, so our first we had agriculture or nomadic aboriginals, then agriculture, then industrial, then service economy. Now we get more and more the economy, the knowledge-based economy. The more it's happening, the other people are forced to go out. So London is turning inside outside. If we look to London, it's this area which is the dense purple colored area. And if you compare that, so you see the river running through, see where the parks are, where those people run down. And this is Amsterdam, but what's happening also is that the pyramid of the population, there's something happening which is quite important, I guess. That's that if you look at the scale of the 25 to 35 age people who are in between that age, then you see that there are more women coming into the city than men at that age. We know that of Sex in the City, for instance. In Utrecht, the central city in Holland, I think it's even much more out of balance. And it's coming because a lot of, there's a difference in mind, of course, as we know, between women and men. And if you want to combine a lot of things, as women do, and you want to care for children, be at the library, be at the study, do a job, sport somewhere, then the city offers more possibilities to combine all those things than living in sprawl. And this is a strange thing, it has a big impact on how people live and where they decide to go and live. So we have in Amsterdam, we have a surplus of young women in between the 18 and the 29 years old. And I can elaborate a bit more on that, but let's go back to a city. So you see women living in a new way of life, new styles. No, it's not a style, it's a pattern of life, which they are needed to give up a lot of comfort that is perhaps in the American dream, but it brings other possibilities. And it's possible to change from role. So some type of fathers are willing to do as well. Until we get problems like this, where school kids are going to school and trucks driving through the city bus lanes here in Sydney join the area for the bikes. In Holland, different from here, we have, of course, cities that were produced in between. So this is the center of Utah, which is made in between 1400 and, let's say, 1700. And if you look from above, this seems to be quite crowded, shoulder to shoulder. Filled with space or filled with mass? As soon as you get down, you're here in this area, it feels like this. And it's perhaps between of the contrasts of being here on the terrace along the water and then going into a small alley and then come on a square filled with people and then go to the bookshop, etc. That if you walk through the city, that your mind is filled with different experiences in which you mirror yourself and think, ah, yeah, I like this, I go there. So, providing literature effect, living literature, walking through the city. And the urgency to do this, to make attractive cities, is more and more clear, as I said, from an ecological point of view, but also just to make people happier. The city is, I didn't translate, it's bring people together in a huge demand. City full of people, city full of space. And it's about people instead of just space, and anyway, not about mass. How to offer that people that space. And why did I study this? If you look to Holland, and we go to look to Leiden, which is the oldest university town in Holland. This was when the Romans were in Holland. Holland with woods. And in 1200, 0.5% of the area in Holland was built up area. As you see there, Leiden is growing. And then in 1650, Leiden became big because the Spanish went over to Belgium and the Protestant people moved out to Leiden. So there was a booming economy, the golden age of Holland, by the war of the Spanish. And we got the city growing this way. In the 1900, we got railways through it. We had the canals, which made that boats provide the interconnection between the cities. And 3% of Holland was built up area. And in 2005, we are here. And if we go a little further and we see the perspective, then this will happen. And although there are 7 million people living in the west of Holland, it's not really dense, but there's little space around. And suppose you would look to this image as a lung photo, and suppose your lungs would look like that instead of like that. Perhaps you would say, I stopped smoking. But smoking is unhealthy and living is healthy. So we love space, we love to live. So what's against this? Or we can compare it with other types of growing a bit too much and have fat textures around the real body. And why did this happen, I ask myself. Yeah, it's because there are too many people. Is it true? Of course, from 1900 to 2000, we got 3 times as much inhabitants. But if I look to this, no, this is not the result of factor 3. There's something else. Yeah, the average people per dwelling is half as much. So in 1900 there lived 5 people in 2 rooms, and now they're living 2 people in 5 rooms. Yeah, that makes a factor 2. And then we get 3 times 2, so that means 6. And the average dwelling is indeed twice as big. So it makes 3 to 2 to 2, makes a factor 12 that we are expanding in our demand for space. And if the space around the house has doubled, then we are up to 24. So if we are doing this graph in which the growth of occupying land is exponential, we should try to see, is it possible to have less people, more people in a dwelling, smaller dwellings? What do we need to do in order to solve this? And occupying space is going further. So in the 50s you had a car, and now we have the same 4 wheels, but all driven. And the need for growing demand inside the house as well. So in Holland there's at this moment most of the people who use, if you count that, let's say 40 square meters, and I think we'll go up to some 85 per meter living per person. And it's not only about dwellings, but if I look to the shops, then we get Rome, and instead of having everything quite near to each other, we have the same jackets, blue over here, and the red one over there, and the white one over there. So we need space to lunch and to think about, do I need a red one or a black one? And if you look to the Mies van der Rohe Lakeshore Drives, there were, I should count again, 8 dwellings, do it right, yeah, on the floor. And they've transformed it at this moment up to having 4. So they're doubling space per unit in the Lakeshore Drive apartments. And there are architects who say, yeah, you should try to live with less space. We can do clever things, and this is clever. You have the stair, you have the elevator, you have storage for your bike, you go in, have the toilet, and then you come into a big room, and that room tends to be a kitchen, if you pour out the kitchen, or it can be a fitness room if you pour out the bike, or bathroom, etc. So it's like
ensuite?
A pharmacy, yeah. In the pharmacy you have those types of cupboards all along, and they put it out and you can take it and you transform the whole space. It's clever. But I wonder if the couple sitting on the bench is doing this. I didn't see. In fact, Le Corbusier did the same with the Maison de Lucheur, where the dining table is over here, and at night the beds come down. So that are solutions by clever architects. the bed, the cupboard. If we look at this and we do it in a figure, then you see it's the amount of people, it's the occupation of the per dwelling, and it's the size of the dwelling, which made that we needed more and more black on our rooms. And doing so in Sydney as well, you transform land to suburban area. Sub in the sense that it's not urban and it's not landscape. And it's occupying more and more and growing around, transforming city with the idea of individual houses this way. And Le Corbusier said, oh, we shouldn't do that because this is a panic. We have solutions. Make a park and make unité d'habitation, and you can walk around with your dog, or you can sport around, and you live together in the unité. So don't do that, but do this. This is much better to do. And the thing is that because a lot of people don't go into the material of density, also politicians, people with the newspaper, who read the newspapers and the press, even many architects think, yeah, crazy, we should have vertical cities. Make vertical cities. And I think I'm not against sprawl, I'm not against high-rise, but I think it has a big misunderstanding of what is possible. I'll show you. Because if we in the Randstad would add each year some 70,000 dwellings a year, then the Randstad would look like this, having meadows somewhere and houses and towers there. And architecture and brokers, they say, yeah, but you don't really need a garden. You don't want it. Why? How we want it? Is this what we want? Dubai in the meadows. I think we should study density more. And we should do that by comparing cities. For instance, if you look to Sydney, and you see the dotted boundary, and you compare with Paris with outside the periphery, because inside the periphery is this. There are 2.2 million people living inside the periphery, but there are 11 million on the blue area, which is more or less similar as Sydney. So it's a factor of 3. In fact, London is more or less same. Amsterdam is much less density than Paris. In fact, Amsterdam is quite similar to Sydney, but it's just having 800,000 people instead of 4 million. And what I think we should study is this. When I'm busy as an architect on the plot where I'm building, I might have a factor of floor area to ground from 2.5. So it might be on the plot. But as soon as I go to the neighborhood, I add some space for extra streets or water around, so the factor diminishes. And the more I go to Amsterdam overall, it is shrink from 2.5 to 0.2. And we should be keen on that. So if the average of a city is too low, then it will spread out. And sometimes it's penny wise, pound foolish, to spend all your energy on the plot but you should look in this whole range. That's my message. Oh, because you can look on a plot, but if there are areas like this around it, and you spoil the space over there, then it has little sense to do your utmost best to intensify the built-up area in a small part. In fact, you could compare it with the fragmentation of your computer. You have all kind of information in your computer, and then it says it's full. And you're asked to defragment that, and you get space. We should defragment our cities, and we should make the space there where we need it, and look forward where is the real value. If you look to this example, which is magnificent in Seattle, there's a lake, and along the lake, of course, there's the railway, because that's easy. And if there's a railway, you can add a road, and you get parking areas, and you get a brown field. And what they did is, the train was difficult to avoid, so the train is still there. But they covered the area of the traffic, and they arranged around it the Olympic Park. And if you consider this area along the lake and the connection with the city, a spoiled space becomes a value space where people go and walk to the museum, or they do their joggings and trips and have feeling of space, perhaps even more than in a suburb area. Or Shanghai, where they transform this traffic area, and they did transform it, to this park. Or Perot, who made a university, extended the university, by building the university in the hills, scarfing the ground up, and having the park on top of it. So density isn't synonymous with high-rise. We know you can live as a family quite easy in this type of houses. So it's quite happy to live there. You're quite near to the kids on the street, perhaps a bit too near to cars. And is this the solution for whom? This is what we thought. And we thought that high-rise has a higher density. But if I compare this living quarter, let's say a Hutang in Jakarta, with the Siam high-rise in Antwerpen, it's the same density. The factor is that it's more or less the same. It's 0.77 to 0.85. But the factor, of course, is the occupation of the land. How much land is saved over there? How much is it over there? Do we need that? Or do we need that? Or do we... But high-rise is not synonymous with density. And now comes the technical part of the lecture. And I try to go quick through that. But an FSE of 1 is easily done by occupying the terrain by 1 store high, or 50%, 2 stores high, etc. And as soon as you do so, you can do that in a percentage which is average, but you can make patterns which deliver more variety and have the same density. So you get different quantities over there with the same quantitative result. And I've made, for instance, this Excel in which you can see that if this, for instance, is the block, let's see, because you can, the building depth a bit too much. So let's say we take 40 meters, then this is the block, and then we can add the average height of the stories, the number of stories, so the building height, and you get an FSC of 2.1. And here the figure over there shows that you could go high. Oh, I first should explain this. I've defined a solar angle of 45 degrees. So this shouldn't be less than, should be sharper than 45 degrees. I can change that. And it's also calculating the amount of outer wall door, and the less outer wall related to the floor space you get if it's an expensive building, because as soon as I would, it's a bit difficult here, but let's say we go up to buildings that are $8 meters, then it becomes expensive. Or it can become dark. And here you see the maximum that I could do if I add some extra stories. Here I'm to the maximum which is possible with this ground plan. Making 30 stories high. Oh no, here. Gets less density. So you can calculate what is, in terms of quantity, the result of your research, your plan. And how does it come that stacking more and more is not providing more density? It's about this. Suppose that you say a street is, like Leonardo da Vinci advocated, it's as wide as the walls around it are, the facades are high. So if I have two bungalows, or 3 meters wide, high, then the street is 3 meters. And as soon as I make a bungalow with another store on top, then I need to move the building 3 meters wider, but I get double the amount of square meters. So it's a bit more space, but double the size of floor area. As soon as I'm, where is this? It's not working. But the more I go up, this happens. It's a bit like driving in your car. You put it in the second gear, and you pull on your gas. And the speed you accelerate is not the same as you push your feet, because the engine goes quicker, but doesn't. The wheels don't go in the same speed unless you go to the third gear. And how is this? Suppose I do this after 4 times again. I add 1 store, so I had 4 stores. The block came up to here. Now I'm going to the 5th store, so get a quarter more space. And I need a bit more area. I had already 3 floors, 4 floors, so we add some 25%, and I need some more space. And at this moment, that the depth of this block is more or less the same as the depth of the width of the street. At that moment, the graph is and it's 45 degrees. So it has the speed you're accelerating up to the 4th floor or up to the size of the street, the Da Vinci Code. Then you have acceleration of density after going through. It's less profit, giving less profit. So we should, as a piano player, we should do a whole lot of play. You do this, and in order to get capable in playing the music you want to play. We should do the same as architects with space as well. And we should do, in my opinion, this silly, because this is quite silly to do those tonalities, but it's in order to get real close to the music. And you should do these calculations. 30% footprint, 50%, 75%, and I need to have more space, so I can do this, but I could also do that, and it arranges the same square meters. And a spreadsheet, yeah, but I don't like a spreadsheet. Oh, let's do it the other way around. Everybody's doing it with me. Suppose we doing a city. And we're doing a city, and your finger is the house. And in between, the houses aren't together because there are streets in between the houses. And together with Da Vinci, we take the same size in between your fingers as the thickness of your finger. And then you think, now I'm going to do the same amount of mass. And now you have to be careful. And we do the same amount of square meters, but we do it in the same direction in this way. This is the high-rise, and this is getting down. You should do this, because then in fact you need more space. So for each hand, you need the same space. So it's better to have 3 hands. And this is quite easy. Making low-rise, high-density delivers the same amount of square meters as doing high-rise. But of course, if you live over here, it's a different feeling from there. And now I'm happy because I want diversity. It's not about being against high-rise, but it's against the discrimination of low-rise, high-density. And I really believe there's a discrimination of high-density, low-rise, low-rise, high-density. By silly architects, by town planners who don't understand anything about density, by politicians who say, oh yeah, we need to have skyscrapers, by newspapers who do feed this. And I ask architects to do this on the birthday parties in order to make that all the people understand that this is just because they didn't do their exercises. Same density in Amsterdam or outside Amsterdam in the Siam area and Utrecht. This is the Breedstraat, so that means the large street, and it's 12.5. It's a bit moving like this. It's 12.5 to 15 meters wide, and that in the 19th century, 17th century, 18th century means it's a wide street. And we do this type of, this one. We also did, not with our hands, but with new computer possibilities. Yeah. So you could have an area built up with different patterns. You can do exercises. What's happening? And here you see the FSE, the percentage of footprint, and the amount of dwellings. We can, in fact, what you should do is add references on this huge block or on the small grain other fabrics that are coming into this film. And by doing so, we have extra means, not just to explain it's working like this way, but this could be the quality in this area. So there's much more to choose than we thought there was by the rigid Siam way of modern thinking. I also, as an exercise, I like this one. Suppose this is a city with everywhere the same density. So it's looking like this. And I'm biking through the city and I'm wondering, where do I want to live? Here or there? It's everywhere the same density. But the conditions where I live here or there are quite different. I think if we do so, we are capable in making a much more richer city, doing our job as architects much more rich, providing cities that are much more rich. And by thinking about spatial quality as architects, we can go further. Da Vinci said, okay, 45 degrees, because otherwise you get no light. But for instance, there's a lot of knowledge in existing cities. If you see this old house in Amsterdam, you see that the different heights of the floors differ. And why did they do so? Because if you're in a house and you need to have light penetrating deep into the house, which in Holland we need, perhaps here it's a bit slightly different, then this happens. As soon as there is a house on the other side of the street, I get this floor. The moment that I can't see the sky, the light can't come into the dwelling. So that if I walk backwards and this stays over here, it's getting dark over here. So we can lower that house, or we can higher this ceiling. That's what we did in Amsterdam. Make high windows on the lower floor, and then in fact you could do this graph and make that the same depth is everywhere for penetrating the light into the house. So you can manipulate this by thinking clever on what is happening instead of following the regulation. The store is 3 meters high, 45 degrees is street wide. Follow that, don't think, do this. No, you should follow your experience, look to what is the experience of other potentials. And you can do this in different ways. This is a Swiss house, which is quite clever, because a sleeping room can be low, but it's nice to have a high living room. And here you see that they put down the blind, unfortunately, but you see the effect that suppose it was as high as the sleeping room over there, you would just see the opposite side of the house. But now by having a higher void into this house, you get the light, you get a feeling of relief. I talked about the square meters inside the house, but we should study that a range of getting lower density as soon as you look to, your focus is broader on the city. And what's happening? We have a net floor area. We're surrounded with gardens, with roads, with parking places, with parks, with water, infrastructure. And by adding this area, we get different densities. But you can make a park city in which you have a lot of park, or a garden city with big gardens, less park. Or you can have a city of streets where there are squares. And in fact they have the same density, but the feeling in this area is completely different. And because we are in for diversity, this is important. So it's not only a question of making the same mass, but it's also a question of how to spend your space, your outdoor space, to the areas. And by doing so, we can make a whole series of profiles for living areas in which we make a different composition of the outdoor space. And this is an important thing. If you have suburb, you have gardens with a house on it. Or if you have high-rise and dense high-rise, you have dense high-rise and in between some space. In Hong Kong, a bit less than in Amsterdam, but this is it. And that's the type you can make. Whereas the possibilities to go and spend space, and that's the graph like this, so the variation you can provide is here quite little, it's Hong Kong, and it's here quite little, because it's less work. But in between, you have a whole area of possibilities to spend your space and mass. And if we're in for diversity, this is the area where we should go. In a way, it's more or less like this. Do 50% of the ground as footprint, and of the 50% you are not on the group footprint, you make different profiles in spending that area. But it can be more clever than this. So you can make park cities, garden cities, or more areas where your densification is slightly different, and I'm going to show some of those projects. Because this is a project we did, and we said this is a garden city, but it will have 75 dwellings per acre. And it looks like that, because there are gardens. Okay, we have to park the gardens over there, and we thought it was necessary that each house had a garden, and each house had a room connected with the garden. So that was the idea, to get a garden city, but with a high density. So it's an FSE of 1 far, or whatever you say. This is the builder block with independent houses quite tight to each other. And seen from above, just realized, it's quite close. And we did it this way. As you see, I do a lot of calculations. And so we looked, and we said it's like a shop with sweets, and there are all different sweets. They are all sugar, and I want to have 2 of those, 3 of that, and 4 of that. And what are the sweets? We have a block with 2 houses, 3 houses, 4 houses in it. And we made a spreadsheet, and we said to the developer, make your choice of our sweets. And we discovered that, in fact, if you see it like this, it's quite soon becomes rich. Whereas as soon as you assemble them sort by sort, which we normally do in our housing productions, then you only need 7 types. And you see those 7 types. As soon as you mix them, you have a bit more than 3 or 4. Then it gets quite rich. So we did this in this area. And first we studied 2 houses in the block, 3 houses in the block, 4, 6, 12, more or less the same density. And the result came out to be this. This is just after finishing it. The lanes are 3 meters wide. You can drive over there. You can have your car close to your house. It could be in the house. And the streets are that narrow that they are not of the cars, but they are of people who live there, children. It's quite near to the center of Amsterdam, but it has the same amount of houses in that area that was first meant to be over there in high-rise blocks. We proved that it would be possible to do so. And another project we are doing a bit later was this one, in which we increased it up to 100 houses per acre, having volumes alone, and up in the corner a high-rise over there. And this is the composition of those houses seen from top. The arrangement of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and more houses in a block, spread it over the site, the topology of those houses, and then the feeling of walking through. And this is, compared with Sydney, it's not that strange, but in Holland we always make row houses. That's the way our production is organized. Make row houses shoulder to shoulder. So this is quite different from what they feel. And you can realize qualities like this, even less than 45 degrees, and giving a feeling of openness of space, and giving a feeling of space in between the way you organize your outdoor space. So in doing so, we get possibilities of getting high density in low rise, and I call it groundscrapers. In fact, what you do is look for small plots with big houses. That's just the question to solve, and architects can do that. You should study magnificent Japanese houses. In Japan, there is something special. The grandfather had a plot and built up the house. And then he had 2 or 3 kids. The grandfather died, and the 3 kids had that plot. And they organized 3 dwellings on that. And then, next generation, again, they moved down the building and built it up. And they're quite clever in how to organize individual houses in a way that you get a density, because Japan is different from Australia. They lack space anyway. They have a lot of sea, but they have mountains, and they have just some space in between. But as I argue, it's perhaps not a question just of covering whole Australia with sprawl. That might do. You might go some years further, but it's not making people happy. So you should study possibilities to do so, and look for possibilities to go and study the vocabulary of houses. And we did this study, having big house on a small plot, or light houses over there. And if you do over there, and you have 40% with 3 floors, 40% built-up area with 3 floors, of course you get 1.2, whereas if you get 40% with 4 floors, you get 1.6. And in case you want to go to a higher density, you see that or the amount of coverage or the stacking should go up. But in the area of 1.2 to 2, there's a whole range of possibilities to develop housing types that arrange those density. I'm going to show another example of how we think about doing an exercise of how to make 100 dwellings per acre, per hectare, not doing it in a stacked way. 100 dwellings on a hectare means that each house has 100 square meters city floor. So if you take 10 to 10 and you cover it for a part for the house, then you have some space left for open space. Could be street, could be garden. Or it can be 7 to 40 meters. And suppose you do 7 to 40 meters and you spend 3 meters of your area to the street, then you get 7 to 14, 7 to 11, I guess. As the coverage, you can make a small garden in it, and you make houses of that type. So on the ground floor, the garage, 3 sleeping rooms and a small patio. You go up the stair, have a kitchen, have the living area, and have a terrace on top of the sleeping room. And if the whole area is a bit on a hill, then you can look from one terrace up to over the other terraces. This was the first calculation, and then the municipality said, yeah, but we need more houses, and I'm going to show this plan, which is quite dense. It's 140 dwellings per acre. And my issue was to deliver for each house an own front door. So you had no communal staircase, but each house had its own front door to the street. And we did this. Here's the piano with the black and the white strips. And we've called it Patio Malaparte, as you know perhaps. The Villa Malaparte by Cuccio Malaparte is on a hill with some capri, and there are no houses around it, but it's looking a bit like this. And so 50% of the volumes are like that, moving up, and the other 50% is dotted in with moss. So here you see the 2 strips, and in between you get the terraces. And on those terraces you can go out and have the outdoor space. So this is 50%, and the other 50%, since it's alternating, is that bay. And there are social houses over here, so they are stacked around a patio, and there are 5 houses over there, because, it's lacking one number. There on top is a house in itself with a terrace in front, and then there are 4 houses here, in fact apartments, but they all have their own staircase over here. Sleeping rooms over there, and then the terraces for those 5 houses, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a garden, 5 in between. And then on this side you get more luxury type of houses. There are each time a 4.20 meter bay, and we took together, let's say 2, in fact it's 3 bays, and we moved in 2 houses each. So 1 house, in fact, in general, in each 4.20 meter. Now we're going to do the plan. So this is the ground floor, and there you see the number is different from what I explained. I should try to. Yeah, I know it's not. It did. Batteries up. Oh. Okay. I have a bay which is open, and you can come to a courtyard with a cross. And if you go further, you see 2 doors and the stairs. And the stairs are made this way. So I can enter, go up 1 store and go up, and the other one is in between. So it's like 2 cork tires, or what is it? Going through each other. And that are the houses the most difficult. But the simple one is you go into the yellow one, which is figure number 2, And it has a front, in the front, a living room, a kitchen, a store, toilet. Then you go down, you have the bathroom and 3 rooms around a garden. Or you go up and then you come into the blue one. What's happening? It's 2 times the same. I understand. Yeah, sorry. Then I go up in the purple one, or blue one, and I come on this floor, and it has 1 sleeping room less, so it gets a terrace. And I have 1 house above the entrance, which is there, and it's wrong, number 1, and it's on top. And let's do first this. And we go up, and the number 1 is extended, the number 4 becomes white, and it has its terrace, which is quite nice, to the other side. So you walk up the stairs, and it has its terrace in the next bay, so related to the corridor, and it has 1, 2, 3 sleeping rooms and a living area. And then you go to number 5, which has its terrace in the L-shaped form. So living area, the kitchen, and this terrace is going back. Now we go to the other houses. They're really nice. Parking. We first go into the green one. So it has 1 room, a 2nd room, and a 3rd room, a bathroom, and a store. I go up this stair. I come over here. I have the kitchen here and the living area over here. And I can go to 1 room, and that room is looking diagonal across that patio to the sleeping room over there. So it's not completely stacked, but it gives a view, and it's privatizing the courtyard. Whereas the other one is coming in, has a room on ground level in order to have practice or a kit which is more independent in the house. Then you go up this stair, and if you're up on that stair, there's a sleeping room, and you go again up that stair, and you come in this area with living room, and then you can go an extra stair on top, and you have a rooftop room. So here they are. The yellow one, blue one for 5th, the house on top of the entrance, the green one with his chapel looking diagonal to on its patio to the own sleeping room, which you see the window there, and then the other one climbing up, having a bathroom, sleeping room, going through, having this top. $140 houses per hectare, but perhaps a bit crazy. But it's possible. But do we need to do this, or can we lower the density of those houses by defragmentation of the area around it? Or, as we were asked to do a project along the railway in the red dotted area, and the urban town planner was quite soon ready with his job, because here there were towers, and he said we're going to do the same on the other side of the railway. I said, yeah, do we need to do this? What is happening? Instead of making those towers, which is the urban plan, we realized this plan. I said, yeah, but if you have, so we went up from 120 apartments to 160 dwellings over here. And his argument for doing the towers was, we have no money to spend for a parking garage. So I said, this is a park, Ville radieus, it's Le Corbusier, living in the park, but the park becomes parking. So in between those high-rise, I get a parking. What if we do 42 houses extra, and the amount of money we save by doing that, we spend it to make a parking garage? It was quite difficult in Amsterdam to organize that because we got a precedent in thinking about the budgets, but we realized it. And so we did this, we made a stacked up block along the street and having a next row of houses into the water over there. And then have just on ground level quite simple parking garage related to those houses. You go into a garden and then the house has a terrace along the railway. So we made 30% houses more in an area which is more safe, in my opinion, and delivering more privacy to people who live in. And there are lots of studies, which I won't go into detail, about the FAR, or the FSE as I say, of densities. And we should study them. 1.1, this is Paris, 1.9 in Paris, 2.2 in Paris, 5 even, and it's all up to 4, 5, 6 stores, and then it's ended. And to go higher, you can have the same density in, what is this, how called? Doesn't it? I thought it was computer. Or you can see that the Corbusian plans had only 2.1, so much lower than most of the examples in Paris. 1.1 Brazil, yeah, and 9.6 in America, but 2.4, 2, around 2, 1.5 to 2.4. There's a whole range of possibilities you could study. Now we come back to, and that's the end, more or less. This graph, which I found on Australia. And it's an important difference with the way I speak about density, because in the English culture, you don't talk about square meters, but you talk about people. And in fact, you're right. But as I explained, it's difficult because I can make surfaces, I can make houses, but how many people are there in the house? That's difficult to arrange. And I'm not sure how this is related to square meters you make in physical sense, how many square meters you make. But you see, in Sydney, you reach the highest density. And you see, it's, so I don't exactly know if it's up to 5 kilometers from central business district. It gets quite high, it's more than 100 persons per hectare. But I'm not sure how many square meters those 100 people do have to their, as their property. In fact, this graph is a bit strange. You should do it mirrored, because you, yeah, unless you have the sea. But in fact, it's if you think about it as a model for cities, you have a center and it's spread around. So in fact, it's a bit like this, which is the profile. And then I wondered,
besides the question, how is this related to an FSE, to square meters, I wondered if this is the right way you should look to those density, because, of course, this is the density, but if you think about it, I think that this is, and you think what is the development? I should like to know how this same graph was 20 years ago and how it developed. And one of the things is we know that there became more high-rise in the center of the city, there became more gentrification. This part of this figure is filled with high-rise development in the last decades. Gentrification. The other part, of course, is over here, and it's the sprawl. And you should like to know what is the relation between how many square meters sprawl and how many square meters densification, and where is the average. And I wondered what would, in fact, a traditional city might be a figure like that. Anyway, in Holland it would be like that. So it's square meters, but perhaps there were more people in those square meters, so you should take it higher. And then you get the sprawl, and you get the densification, and what is the profile of the city you want? So you could think about the city in terms of density like this, have it dense and spreading out to the boards. And now back to proximity. If I live in the center, this is the area where I'm connected. Whereas if I take the same distance and I'm over there, then I see where I'm connected with people, activities, amenities over there. And because amenities, of course, choose for a site over here, it's not, this graph is not correct, because it's not only the density of people that is lower, but the density of amenities is much lower over there than there. So I have to do a lot more of distances over here than there. And if you do so, then density becomes much more dynamic than just these figures. You could think about the city, which is the reverse, having a central park. And so it has the same density as the other figure. But people who live here, where will be the amenities? Because they are the same, they have the same density. But if they want to go to someone over there, they have to do a lot of kilometers. So I'm not sure if this is serving real. We can have the solution, this is the center. Or you can have the green belt scheme, in which you have that center, then a circle of green, parks, a boundary of parks, and then again, climbing up. And I would like to know how it developed. This was what I looked for. Perhaps if not any longer 5 people are living in 2 rooms, but 2 people are living in 5 rooms, then the density is getting lower, as is this first figure. You have the gentrification and you have the sprawl. You should like to have models that show how it really developed, and then we can translate that in spatial experiences just as a figure, in order to, because this is just mathematics. But if you have this in your head as a model, then you can look to the developments and translate it and ask you to put your more questions forward into your analysis. You can wonder, okay, Paris, all the people, if you have twice the center of Paris, all the people of Sydney would be accommodated. So you can have one on the Bondi part and one on Parramatta or on top. What would happen? how much sprawl, how will I distribute by this densification. And there's one other remark I want to do on this figure, and that's this. There's, of course, you have to translate it to the real geographics, so let's say a river. But now you should consider this. The black figure has the same ground area as this one or as that one. It's like your plate. The center of your plate, we normally don't are conscious about that. The center of your plate is, with most plates you have, has the same size as the border. So if this figure is made in this concentration, so it's only looking forwards to the radius of the city, suppose this is the black area, then the next square meters, which is this area, represents just this area. If you take the same square meters. So this density is within, in this scheme, the first 20 kilometers. Then we add 4 kilometers around it, it's the same square meters. We can add 3 kilometers around it with the same size, etc. So the average of the city is not somewhere over here, but it's over here. Because the more of the same size particles, square meter city I add, the lower it gets. And that's why it's sometimes pound foolish, penny wise, to spend all your energy on the housing types. You should make a politics of it. So I'm going to stop with do this mathematicism, do the exercises, look to how the city is occupied by people, see how the texture of the area you make is grained, because in this grain and in this grain you get completely different interaction between private area and build-up area. Make that interaction gets vivid, because you can have a lot of people with blank walls, or you can have a lot of people behind that walls. But the question is to make the proportion in which people in the public area and the private area interact. But because that's what giving cities in which you have the feeling of space. High-rise buildings aren't the solution. So they tear them down. They give this relation to the street, looking outward of your apartment. Oh, my kid is outside. What is space? Is space square meters? Cubes? No, it's sensation. It's feeling, it's possibility. If you say you should give your kids space, it means more opportunities and not cubics. It means not gardens, it means opportunities. It means a proximity to other possibilities, to other happenings. So how to make attractive cities in which spacious dwellings feed a concentrated public domain of high quality, because density should be high quality. It should be a density of qualities instead of a density of quantities. What we need isn't quantity. What we don't need isn't quality. What we need is quantity of quality. Qualities. Because the feeling of being connected with the city outside your room. That's the feeling of being related to the city, to the public world. Leave me alone. Or be together in the city, make cities full of space.